Hi there, it's Diane the Nursing Geek. Today's video is a request from Chris, who commented on the first video in this series on sepsis and had specifically asked for some information on heat stroke. So, it's a 90-something degree day in July, perfect day to be talking about heat stroke, at least in the northern hemisphere. Apologies to those of you who are freezing down in the southern hemisphere. Anyway, let's get into it. So the author who requested this is specifically working on giving a character heat stroke. I'm going to talk about a few other things because there might be other levels of heat-related illness that any author might want to give their characters, or that the character might experience on the way to heat stroke. Because despite the way the name sounds, it tends not to just come out of the blue. So, as usual, I'm using the Mayo Clinic as a primary source. They're a great resource, and most importantly, you can actually click a link and go read what they have to say, as opposed to, if I start linking you to academic journals, you're probably going to have to go through a paywall, which that's just not necessary for this level of research for what you're going to have your character going through. So first there's heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Like sepsis, you've got three progressive levels of heat-related illness. Heat cramps are caused by dehydration, fluid loss from sweating, electrolyte loss from sweating, because the character's hot, and probably also doing something very physically active, and these cramps are worse than your typical Charlie horse. So if that is something that would be within your character's frame of reference, they are probably going to think, wow, this is worse than anything I've ever experienced. If Charlie horse is the phrase they would use, go for it. If not, then whatever fits. You know, the cramps you get in your legs at night, whatever. Tends to happen during heavy exercise in hot environments because you've got the sweating and the muscles being used heavily. So, okay, my character has heat cramps. Now what? They need fluid, and lots of them. Preferably something that's cool or cold, not hot, and not alcohol or caffeine related beverages. They need rest, and once those muscles have started to release the cramps a bit, they need to start doing some gentle stretching to get the cramps to stop completely. Of course, if you want things to progress, then you make it impossible for them to do any of those things. And then we move on to the next step, which is heat exhaustion, which, first thing it's got, muscle cramps. Again, heavy sweating. Their skin might actually be cool, possibly with some goosebumps, because the body's overloaded, overwhelmed, trying to cool itself off, not entirely effectively, and things just start going a bit haywire. So paradoxical things like cool, clammy skin with even maybe goosebumps would be an indication that this character is moving towards the heat exhaustion end of things. And they've probably got some nausea, but not vomiting, headache. They're, excuse me, almost certainly fatigued, which would be why they call it heat exhaustion, and probably feeling dizzy and faint, because the more dehydrated you get, the lower your blood pressure goes. The lower your blood pressure goes, the more you're going to feel dizzy and faint. And if anybody's available to check their pulse, it's going to be weak and rapid because of that low blood pressure. If there's not enough fluid in the blood vessels because it's all been sweated out of you, then your body's working extra hard to try and get that blood to the organs to keep them fed with oxygen and other nutrients. So, hence, weak pulse, and rapid pulse, more to the point. Great, my character has heat exhaustion, so now what? Again, what they would need is to cool off. They need to get out of the heat, out of the sun. That's just plain instinct if you're melting. Into air conditioning, if that is a thing that exists in the world your character inhabits or is available to them. At a minimum, they are probably going to be trying to fan themselves with absolutely anything that is available because they just want to cool off. And they need fluids, lots and lots of fluids. Again, no alcohol, nothing with caffeine. Those both tend to ultimately dehydrate you, leaving you with a net fluid loss. And so you might feel better for a little bit, but then things are going to get worse. So if, again, the reason you're doing this is to put your character in further jeopardy, maybe that's all that's available to them, is something with caffeine or something with alcohol. And they drink that because they know they need fluid, they need something. And they'll feel better for a little bit, and I mean very little bit, and then things are just going to get worse. And they need to make sure their blood is going to their brain. So they need to lie down with their feet up because, again, low blood pressure from low fluid in the blood vessels means it's harder to get oxygen to all the vital organs, and the most vital organ is the brain. So get gravity on their side, get them to lie down and put their feet up, or, you know, again, if you're trying to make things worse, make that impossible. And somebody should be watching them to make sure it doesn't progress to heat stroke. Somebody who's not in the same condition they are, preferably. And now we come to the actual requested topic of heat stroke. Now your character isn't just nauseous, they're vomiting. And as you can imagine, this makes the whole dehydration problem worse, which will make their headache worse. And they'll probably have a change in sweating. And the classic, although it's not the only, as you'll see if you follow the link below, but the classic is that their skin actually becomes hot, flushed, and dry. They have run out of fluid to sweat. Their body is desperately holding on to what little fluid it has left to try to keep the circulation going. So that is a symptom you probably would want to incorporate just to make it really clear, oh wow, something's gone horribly wrong here. They're burning up and they're not even sweating. And their breathing is going to be extremely rapid, and their heart is going to be racing, again, because trying to get oxygen to the organs with blood that is very low on fluid to actually get it moving. And this is going to lead to a change in mental status, because hard as the body's working, even if you got them lying down at this point with their feet up, it's probably not enough. So they're going to have agitation, they might be restless or delirious, could be having seizures, great for dramatic effect, or going into a faint or even coma. All of this because their body temperature, core body temperature, has reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, if you click the link below, it's going to say that this needs to be verified by a rectal temperature. There's a reason that it's very rare to take rectal temperatures. There is a risk for perforating the bowel. If somebody's dehydrated, guess what? That risk is worse. So odds are, unless your character is in a hospital or healer's tent or whatever fits the world that you have them in, nobody's checking a rectal temperature. If they even have a thermometer that would be useful for that purpose, they're not going to risk making matters worse by potentially causing the patient to bleed and lose more fluid that way. So great, my character has heat stroke. Now what? Well, they need help. This is not going to resolve itself. If in their world 911 exists, if they're living in our modern world, in the US it would be 911, in Iceland it would be 112, some other places I think it's 999. Whatever the appropriate emergency number is, somebody needs to call it, or at least think about the fact that they wish they could call it. If your world doesn't have that, whether it's a different planet or just a different time period, somebody should be sending for a nurse, a doctor, a healer, a mage, whatever is appropriate to your setting. Because again, this is not going to fix itself. They need help. And they desperately need to cool off. They need to be out of the sun and out of the heat. Ideally, they need to be put into a cool bath. Maybe not a tub full of ice cubes. That seems to be the dramatic thing they like to do in the movies. That actually could cause shock as well, although at this point the person is so hot you might be willing to risk that just to get that temperature down. And remove any excess clothing. One of the reasons we wear clothing is to stay warm because it retains body heat. That needs to go so the heat can radiate out of the patient and they can start to cool off. But again, if you're trying to make things worse, make all of that impossible. So you might have seen an article or two recently about heat stress. There have been a couple in mainstream press from the CDC because it's July and in the US it's really, really hot right now. It's basically the body's response to excessive heat. It's considered an occupational hazard, so it has some really specific definitions, which we'll get to in a second. Not the definitions, but how you can look at what they are in different situations. An example would be a firefighter. If you were expected to go into a burning building with all that equipment on and all that protective gear on, yeah, you're going to be exposed to heat stress. And that's what causes the heat cramps or exhaustion or strokes and heat rashes. I didn't really go into heat rashes. They're not particularly dramatic. They're more just annoying. So, my character has a heat-intensive job. What will it take to put them at risk? You are in luck. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, have guidelines for that. And they have an app for that, which is linked below. The app is geo-specific, so it's not going to be something, I don't think, that you can put in your specific place that you want your character to be and what the temperature is going to be and the humidity and all those other factors and get a result of how much danger they're in. But it does also have all of their guidelines, and the reason I'm not trying to recreate all of their guidelines is A, because you can get it from this app, and B, because it really is complicated. It's not simply, okay, the temperature is this and or the humidity is this. It's those and or this other thing and or this other thing. So go forth and explore that on your own to see what's going to fit your specific character's situation. Here are your references, which are also linked below, along with the link to that page on the CDC website that will get you to that app. So I hope that was helpful. Please comment down below and let me know if it was helpful to you. If so, what was helpful? And if that wasn't quite what you needed in order to deal with what you're writing for a character who's dealing with heat stroke or other heat-related illness, let me know and I will try to figure out what to add that would help. Also, let me know if there are other things that you are interested in this series of nursey stuff related to writing. The next video in this series, not necessarily the next chronologically, but the next video in this series is going to be on puncture-related injuries, projectile-related injuries, because that's already been requested. But anything else, please let me know, and I will get it for you. Until then, take care. Bye.